An entirely new battle in the hills of northern Syria has broken out, but this time it's not part of the country's civil war. Until recently, Kurdish fighters have been combating ISIS, but now they're being targeted by Turkish forces who are trying to push them east of the Euphrates River. Joining us in the studio today is Dr. Mordechai Kedar to talk about how the situation in Syria will have an impact on Israel and the Middle East. Thanks so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
So to begin, what is going on in Syria? That's the big question right now.
Well, first of all, there is no Syria anymore. This once have been state is not a state anymore. This is only on the map. On the ground, there are many parties who are actually eating the corpse of the thing which once was Syria. There's the Russians and the Turks and the Iranians and Hezbollah, and Assad, and the rebels, and other rebels, and other rebels, and all kinds of organizations, hundreds of organizations only on Syria, in addition to the outsiders who invade, recently Turkey. Turkey today is concerned with one thing: how to prevent an establishing of another Kurdistan, this time on the Syrian ruins, after she has already one Kurdistan on the ruins of Iraq. Because Turkey is afraid that these two parts of Kurdistan, Iraq and Syria, will unite and become too big, too dangerous, and will ignite the situation inside Turkey with the Kurds as well. But this thing, they are in the same boat with the Iranians, because in Iran also there are Kurds who are actually willing to get rid of the Iranian occupation, the Persian occupation as they say it, in order to unite with their brothers in Iraq, in Syria, and in Turkey. So definitely what we see today, the invasion of the Turkish army into Syria, is in order to prevent exactly this.
Now, what about Russia and the United States? What is their involvement in Syria right now?
Well, today there is some kind of meeting of interests between the United States and Russia, because both states still want to resuscitate this dying regime of Assad, because they are afraid both that a disintegration of Syria will bring in a chaos which nobody will be able to control. So Assad, although nobody really loves him, especially the Americans, yet he is viewed as the least bad option compared to other options, especially the Islamic State, which can disseminate its Islamic jihadist ideology all over the world through the social media, as we see during the last few years. So today, there is an understanding between the United States and Russia that Turkey should do its job with the Kurds in order not to promote the disintegration of the state, in this case, to a Kurdish state. And another thing is that nobody really wants to aggravate Erdogan, because too many parties, especially NATO in the United States, rely on Incirlik, on the airbase of Incirlik, for various reasons. So, and they are afraid that if they aggravate Erdogan, he will kick them out. And he was almost about to do it a month ago after the coup d'etat, which he blamed the Americans to be part of. And he wanted to kick them out from Incirlik. And I think Biden was sent mainly in order to calm him down. So definitely Turkey today is being treated very gently by the Americans and the Russians, and now we can even see cooperation between Turkey and the superpowers, while Turkey is waging a war against allegedly the Islamic State and actually against the Kurds, who are fighting the Islamic State.
I don't know if this can get any more complicated. So how does this conflict impact the Middle East and more specifically Israel?
Well, Israel, thank God, is not involved in the chaos in Syria, and it should be like this, as long as Israel's interests are not threatened by any party in Syria yet. However, Israel has to be very careful not to allow, first of all, the Islamic State to arrive to the border with Israel, because this will create a clash no doubt. And Israel should also keep a very good eye open in order not to allow Hezbollah take over parts of Syria in order to establish another Hezbollah-stan on the ruins of Syria next to the Israeli borders near the Hermon mountain. So this is what Israel should look for, not more than this, because we are too small and too weak in order to re-engineer the Middle East, which superpowers like Russia and the United States fail for years to shape.
Now, you know, we're seeing last week there was some mortar fire, some rounds of rockets that came in from the Syrian border, and Israel's had to respond to this by essentially attacking Assad forces because Israel continues to blame Damascus for any type of violence or confrontation that takes place on the border, despite where it's coming from. What does Israel need to be doing to maintain safety on this border? Is that the right choice to be making when there's fire coming over the border?
Well, the story is a bit more complicated. It's not only the Syrian regime which shoots and sometimes shoots at Israel.
Right.
It's all the parties who are fighting in front of the Golan, here and there.
But Israel chooses to...
Israel always hits the party which hits Israel, regardless of who they are, because Israel actually wants them all. You want to kill each other? Go ahead. Leave us alone. We are not part of the chaos in Syria. We don't want to be part of it. And whoever targets Israel, whether willingly or not willingly, Israel will be there to deter him.
But are these retaliatory strikes in any way dangerous for Israel?
No. Israel has to be viewed as a state which nobody dares to mess with. This is the only peace which Israel can look for in this unfortunate region. There is this region, not a region of hugs and kisses. This is a region of deterrence based on credible threat. And if your threats are not credible, forget it. Your threats should be credible. Everybody has to be afraid of you. This is when you get peace in the Middle East.
Now, this is a slightly different topic, although related. You know, we're seeing a lot of Syrian refugees trying to make their way out of the country, and Israel has been providing medical care for many of these people. But what is Israel's obligation, if at all, to people in need from Syria?
Look, Israel takes care of them when they are wounded and they come to the Israeli border, and it should be like this because Israel cannot sit aside and see how people are dying when they can be treated and saved. This is one thing. The other thing is what to do with millions of Syrians who are fleeing from their country because of the deterioration of the inner situation. In my view, the countries which are participating in the chaos in Syria should take all these refugees. First of all, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. They should be the first to be forced to take Syrian refugees. Why didn't Iran take Syrian refugees? Why didn't Saudi Arabia take some of them? Why didn't Kuwait? Why didn't all the Emirates? Those who really contributed money, weapons, training to all those who are tearing Syria apart. Why should they go to Europe? What, did Europe take any part in the disintegration of Syria? Why should be the Europeans responsible for what happens in Syria? Why didn't the world, including America, force the Iranians? You want to deal with us? You take 100,000 Syrians. Why? Because you support Assad. And you gave him weapons, you gave him money, you gave him ammunition, and you give him political support. You are part of the chaos in Syria. You should take at least 200,000 of Syrian refugees. Why didn't the world say it to Iran? I have absolutely no idea.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Doctor.
Pleasure.
And hopefully we'll have you back again.